So my name is Mohammad Adil Inam, and today my co-author Adam Bates and I will be talking about our SOK on auditing the provenance of system intrusions. So to give some background, auditing is one of the most foundational concepts in operating system security. With the sharp increase in data breaches over the recent years, the need for improved auditing capabilities is more than ever. When proactive security measures such as authorization and authentication fail, auditing is the one that forms the basis of all forms of reactive security. However, despite auditing's foundational importance, it had been largely ignored in the system security literature. Lampson in 2015 stated that auditing is a topic that's not very sexy. He further stated that the community as a whole is way underinvesting in auditing, in my opinion. So this trend can be seen in the figure below, where we see that the number of papers published in the system auditing domain at top security conferences up until 2015 is relatively scarce. However, post-2015, we see that the picture changes, and there is a sharp increase in the number of papers published in this area. So this research and interest in system auditing is largely due to the notion of data provenance. So what exactly is data provenance? It is a technique that iteratively parses audit log entries into data dependency graphs that explain the history of system execution. This makes data provenance an invaluable tool for threat detection and investigation, and it has sparked a lot of recent work in this area. However, with the rapid publication of recent findings, coupled with limited foundational audit literature, it becomes very hard to gain a holistic picture of the advancements and recent challenges in this area. Moreover, it is important to understand what are the central challenges surrounding system auditing and what progress has been made to overcome these obstacles. So to answer this question and talk about our work, I'll now invite Adam to the stage.
Thank you. See, folks, our SOK has everything that you'd come to expect from a quality SOK. There's taxonomies and tables galore, and of course, the tables have those little satisfying half circles inside of them. I just love those. But we all know that that doesn't really translate to a conference talk. So instead, I thought that I'd use this time to recognize 3 of the practical breakthroughs to real-world problems that have come out of this literature over the past few years. Breakthrough number 1 relates to reducing time to insight. The average time required to detect a data breach is over 200 days. And the cost of a breach increases proportionally with the attacker's dwell time within a system. A contributor to these long dwell times is the high cost of manually reviewing system logs when an alert occurs. Analysts basically issue a convoluted series of join queries to access the system events that are related to suspicious activity. Now, Provenance can help to speed this process up by automatically joining related events. But even so, more often in practice, we end up with an overly noisy and complex graph like this inscrutable WannaCry attack scenario shown here. The reason for this is an intrinsic semantic gap in system event telemetry. Whether we're looking at it as a log or as a graph, system events still aren't going to be able to explain the internal semantics of a process. So as a result, when we're tracing back the timeline of events in an investigation, it's difficult for us to tell which inputs to a program link to the suspicious outputs that we're curious about. This leads us to breakthrough number 1, execution partitioning, which observes that it's often possible for us to identify and separate autonomous units of work within a process, that is, a sequence of process activity that's not dependent on prior sequences. Decomposing a process into these execution units makes it easy to trace suspicious activity through system execution. This improvement in precision compounds as we trace through more and more programs such that we can turn that convoluted WannaCry attack graph into a concise summary of the attack chain. Techniques for execution partitioning have been performed based on automated program transformation, cross-referencing other event streams, or even completely passive observation of the log. Our second practical breakthrough is a solution to the threat alert fatigue problem. Today's threat detection products fire far too many alerts for analysts to investigate them all, and the ones that they do investigate most often turn out to be false alarms. However, it's It's straightforward enough for us to produce a provenance graph that explains why an alert was triggered. And when we analyze that alert with respect to its historical context, something surprising happens. We're actually able to predict whether it's a true alert or a false alarm. In other words, an alert's provenance predicts its veracity. To understand why, consider these two programs that both triggered an alert by reading and writing a program to too many files in a short span of time. If the provenance of program 1 indicates that it was an email attachment, whereas the provenance of program 2 indicates that it's part of a trusted system update, we might reasonably conclude that program 1 is ransomware, while program 2 might be some legitimate compression utility. So techniques for this provenance-based analysis of alerts have been demonstrated for both individual alerts as well as prioritizing clusters of alerts. And so the last practical breakthrough I wanted to highlight relates to the long-term storage of event telemetry. Storing system logs is costly, forcing many companies to discard logs after a few months, if not sooner. But it takes over 200 days to realize that you've had a breach, meaning quite often companies find themselves in a situation where they've discarded the relevant evidence before even realizing that they've been compromised. Breakthrough number 3 is the discovery that the vast majority of system logs will never be relevant to any attack investigation, and that these irrelevant entries can be safely identified and removed. So to give you a little intuition as to how that's possible, consider this repeated sample provenance graph on the screen. The LogGC algorithm identifies and removes dead-end activities, things like temporary files or ephemeral processes that are quickly created and destroyed without having causal links to the rest of the system. The causality-preserving reduction algorithm removes redundant links created by repetitive file I/O activity, leaving us with a minimally sufficient information flow graph of system events. And the dependence preserving reduction algorithm goes a step forward and removes any edges that are redundant with respect to identifying the ancestors of a given node. So in other words, if there's multiple paths between a node and its ancestor, we drop one of the paths. So all 3 of these systems report some environments where they can reduce the log size by an order of magnitude. That is awesome. But it does beg the question, if we can run them all in tandem, do we end up reducing the log size by 3 orders of magnitude? Well, to give you an answer to that question, I'll hand the mic back to Adil.
So, as Adam mentioned, given the importance of log reduction in the system auditing pipeline, we conducted an empirical comparative analysis of 8 different log reduction techniques. In addition to the 4 techniques mentioned by Adam in the last slide, we include 4 more techniques in our analysis. PCAR, or process-centric approximation reduction, is a more aggressive form of CPR, which removes events from the audit log while retaining approximated information flow. We also include 3 templatization-based techniques in our analysis. Node merge replaces a set of read-only file with individual templates. Winner summarizes multiple log entries together using graph grammars, whereas logapprox represents multiple repetitive log entries using regexes. We evaluated the performance of all 8 reduction techniques on 4 different data sets from the DARPA Transparent Computing Attack Engagements 3 and 5. For implementing all these techniques, we utilized FOST, which is an audit log reduction tool developed by our lab. If you would like to hear more about FOST, our system description paper can be found in ACSEC 2022. So, moving on to the results of our analysis, I'll first talk about the space efficiency of individual techniques. The percentage reduction by each technique across all 4 data sets is shown in the figure below. So here we see that techniques which retain the complete information flow offer much less reduction potential as compared to the techniques which do not retain the complete information flow. Moreover, we observed that the performance of these reduction techniques varies significantly by the data set due to the varying application and system workloads. Secondly, we wanted to understand the synergy and overlap between different reduction techniques, and to do so, we conducted a pairwise analysis between all the techniques, and the results are visualized in the heat map below. So the heat map shows the percentage unique events filtered by the technique in the row as compared to the technique in the column. So if we read across the CPR row, we see the percentage unique events that CPR filters as compared to every technique in the column. Similarly, if we read down the SDPR column, we see which techniques, when applied with SDPR, would provide the most value addition. Here, we interestingly observe that log-GC and node merge, which are in fact the worst individual performers, provide the most value addition when applied with SDPR. Secondly, we observe that we get diminishing returns as more and more reduction techniques are applied. So to give some context, with DPR alone, we get 8x reduction factor, and while applying all 8 reduction techniques together, we get an 11x reduction factor. So there is only a 3x increase in reduction factor. So to answer the initial question posed by Adam, unfortunately, we do not get multiplicative benefits by applying multiple reduction techniques together. However, we observe that these log reduction techniques synergize pretty well with compression-based schemes, and they complement each other very nicely. For instance, in the table below, we see that log reduction with log reduction, we get around 11x reduction factor as mentioned before. With a gzip-based compression-based scheme, we get around 23x reduction factor. However, when we combine both log reduction and compression together, we do end up getting multiplicative benefits, that is a reduction factor of 186x. So to quantify it differently, if your company was previously able to only store 3 days worth of log data, it would now be able to store 1.5 years worth of data within the same space by applying both of these techniques together. Lastly, we also wanted to understand how the forensic utility of these logs is impacted by applying these reduction techniques. So to do so, we evaluated the performance of 3 different state-of-the-art intrusion detection systems on these different reduced logs. The results are visualized in the figures below. For DeepLog, which is a sequence-based anomaly detector system, we see that as we move from left to right in the graph, that is, as the reduction technique gets more and more aggressive, the precision and recall values for DeepLog start to decrease. Similarly, for StreamSpot, which is a graph-based anomaly detector system, we see that as the reduction technique gets more aggressive, the separation between the attack anomaly score and the benign anomaly score starts to decrease. And lastly, for Prof Detector, which is a path-based anomaly detector system, we see that as the reduction technique gets more aggressive, as we move from left to right in the graph, the percentage attack paths retained by Prof Detector also decrease. In short, we observe an inverse relationship between the storage efficiency and the anomaly detection performance. So this is an alarming insight, and we believe that future work in this area should perform a similar analysis to ours to understand the efficacy of their log reduction schemes. Moving on to future directions, we identify several avenues of future work in our paper. For reducing time to insight, we believe that it is a socio-technical problem, and future research in this area should engage industry stakeholders to better understand the challenges and implications associated with provenance-based techniques. Moreover, for improving end-to-end audit security, we envision further research into the forensic validity of log reduction techniques, as well as the causal analysis as well as the security implication of causal analysis algorithms. In the spirit of motivating future research, our complete measurement infrastructure is available online. Thank you so much for listening to our talk, and I'm open to any questions from your end.
All right. Thank you very much for the interesting presentation. We have about 90 seconds or so for questions. If then, Adam, you want to? So I was puzzled about your findings with respect to loss of utility. So my gut feeling in the question that I had noted down earlier is like, does the reduction in size actually come with a reduction in utility? And it does, right?
Yeah.
Did these works not evaluate this at all, or?
So interestingly enough, most of these like prior works, so when they evaluate the efficacy of their work, it's mostly through anecdotal case studies. So there's, to the best of our knowledge, there's no proper like analysis or like a quantifiable analysis where they basically compare how the performance of anomaly detection systems, let's say, is impacted. So hopefully this work would basically act as a baseline for all the future techniques to do that.
Okay. And now in your case, you didn't use anecdotal evidence, but so how do you know that you can trace back actual attacks?
Okay, so basically for the DARPA TC dataset that we basically evaluated it on, so you can actually have like, you can label the attack part of the dataset, and if ideally these reduction techniques, because the kind of like main goal of these techniques is to remove forensically irrelevant information from the graph or from the logs. So if at the end of the day, these reduction techniques are removing all the attack events from the dataset, so you can kind of like see like the efficacy in that sense.
In case they give you a labeled ground truth data set.
Yeah, a labeled ground truth data set, which is also a problem in our community. Like there is no proper labeled ground truth data set in the first place, and our lab is making an effort to do that as well. So hopefully we'll be able to open source that as well.
Perfect. Then thank you very much. much for the presentation and the discussion. So I can clap. I thank our speaker again.